Hey guys, I'm Fancy, and this is Murder by Design. And tonight is our very first official Psych Talk with Amanda, but she's running a little bit late tonight, so I'm going to kind of be manning the flames here for a few minutes while we chat about different things. We did a Psych Talk last Wednesday during the day for one of our tidbits. It went over 15 minutes, obviously, but that was on moms and dads who kill, so parents who kill, which was very important for us to talk about because we're kicking off our Good Wives season 3 at the end of January, beginning of February, depending on when we get everything situated, with two very big family annihilator cases. And those are the cases of Chris Watts and Christian Longo. So we're going to be talking about those in our new season. Now, these psych talks are going to be on a variety of different topics, all, psychology as it pertains to criminology and the justice system. But tonight, we're going to be talking about kids who commit either violent or even some nonviolent crimes and the death penalty and life sentences. So studies show that the brain is not fully developed until the age of 25. However, the thought process of the teen mind is even more different than just being not fully mature. So they think with different parts of their brains than adults. And according to University of Rochester Medical Center Health Encyclopedia, adults think with prefrontal cortex, the brain's rational part. This is the part of the brain that responds to situations with good judgment and awareness of long-term consequences. Teens don't use that. They process information with the amygdala, and this is the emotional part of the brain. So in teens' brains, the connections between the emotional part of the brain and the decision-making center, they're still developing, and not always at the same rate. And that's why when teens have overwhelming emotional input, they can't explain later what they were thinking. They weren't thinking as much as they or feeling. But we still charge these teens young as 13 and 14 with capital murder and then try them as adults. So is this fair? Is it right to sentence them to a life behind bars for a decision they made with an underdeveloped thought process? Tonight, these are the questions Amanda and I are going to discuss. I'm going to play for you about an 8-minute clip right here from PBS. It's about juvenile lifers. And I found it very, very interesting. So it's about an 8-minute clip. So it's a little bit long, but I'm going to play it for you guys because I really felt like it was something that gave us a lot of information about these things. So here we go. Let's see here. Let me go over and push play. And then I'm going to come back. Please, somebody let me know that you guys can hear it.
Trump signed into law a bipartisan federal criminal justice reform bill that reduced mandatory sentences. Many states followed suit, with a notable exception, the state of Maryland. In this story, produced in collaboration with the University of Maryland's Howard Center for Investigative Journalism, national correspondent John Yang reports on the uncertain fate of prisoners who are still serving life sentences for crimes they committed as minors.
In the 1990s, fear and anger over violent crime led to a sharp increase in incarceration. That included sentencing large numbers of juveniles to life in adult prisons without parole. In 2012, the Supreme Court declared that cruel and unusual punishment. But in Maryland, so-called juvenile lifers now in their 50s and 60s still wait for parole. Earl Young had been sentenced to life at age 17.
The system is broke. The system needs fixing. And one individual, Mr. Paris Glendenning, was the head of this situation.
Paris Glendenning was Maryland's liberal Democratic governor. During his first campaign in 1994, he sought to counter attacks that he was soft on crime.
We must stop the slaughter that is going on in our communities. I support putting violent offenders in prison and giving what I call truth in sentencing. If you're sentenced to life in prison, it ought to mean life in prison and not 11 years the way it does today.
By 1994, Earl Young had served 9 years for first-degree murder and a robbery gone wrong. Tell me what it was like as a 17-year-old to go into a maximum security prison.
Hard. I went into the Maryland Penitentiary with supposedly some of society's worst of the worst.
Were you scared?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
His hope, the possibility of parole.
I felt optimistic because I applied myself. I kept steady employment. I stayed out of trouble to the best of my ability. My days were complete with, from the beginning to the end, with all constructive things.
But after Glendenning announced in 1995 he would no longer sign paroles, Young would remain in prison another 24 years. More than 300 juvenile lifers sit in Maryland prisons, among them 55-year-old Calvin McNeil, convicted at 17 of first-degree murder in a dice game turned violent. We spoke to him by phone.
I was sentenced to life with parole. That's been 38 years, 3 months, and 10 days ago. Every time I go up, they always say, keep doing what you're doing and such and such, but we can't do anything right now because of what the governor said. And I've been stuck ever since.
Now Glendenning sees things differently.
I made a mistake. It was a very bad mistake in the sense that it impacted people, impacted subsequent administrations, but it was a mistake. And I think it's important to acknowledge.
Because of the governor's extraordinary power, that mistake had an outsized impact.
Maryland is fairly unique among states in giving the authority to parole someone serving a life sentence exclusively to the governor. In other states, it would be a parole board.
ACLU attorney Sonia Kumar is suing the state to restore a full parole system and allow these lifers a chance at release.
Maryland system has been set up so that opportunities for release are almost like winning the lottery. It's unpredictable. It's rare. There are many more people who are arguably deserving of it that can never get it.
The figures in the ACLU suit are striking. Before Glendenning, 4 governors issued 181 parole orders over 25 years. In the next 23 years, starting with Glendenning, just 2 paroles were issued, both by current Governor Larry Hogan, both adult lifers.
You are serving a sentence that is life with parole on paper, but in practice, parole is really unattainable.
From his Baltimore office, Walter Lomax has organized lifers and their families as part of the ACLU lawsuit.
We became more politically astute, right? Individuals understood that this was a political issue because the governor made that decision based on politics.
Lomax had been in prison 38 years before it was established he had been wrongfully convicted. When Glendenning said he would no longer sign paroles, Lomax's parole recommendation was sitting on the governor's desk.
I was one of those people, so it was pretty demoralizing. Yeah.
He understands the perspective of victims' families.
My young brother was murdered, and one of my grandsons was murdered in this city. And so I personally know the pain and anguish that the family member feel for that loss. So these men who've committed horrible crimes, and I look at them at this later point in their lives, and I see someone that's totally remorseful, that's totally different from the person that they were when they committed the crime.
I'm 55 years old. I have to be a person that's crazy and out of his mind that has spent 30-something years in prison to go back out into society and do something crazy, come back to prison.
Earl Young's sentence was commuted this year by Governor Hogan. He now works as a mentor in the Baltimore school system, trying to discourage teens from repeating his mistakes.
How have you changed in those 34 years?
Impulsive behavior, gone. Immature thinking, gone. Putting others before myself, absolutely.
Glendenning now says the governor should be taken out of the process.
All the powers you want, to be involved in that kind of decision is not one of them. The issues are too emotional and too political to put on the desk of someone who's going to turn around in a few months, a year, and run for election. And almost ask for
political decisions on something that should not be political.
Yes, individuals have committed some serious crimes. But, and I say but, for those who are deserving of a second opportunity, what's the process? It has to be better than what we have.
Times may be changing. In recent weeks, Hogan has paroled the first 3 juvenile lifers in 24 years. Young cherishes Hogan's letter telling him he would be a free man.
The best thing that I read during the course of my incarceration was the executive order with my name on it. It says, "Dear Mr. Young, I have accepted the recommendation of the Maryland Parole Commission and ordered that your life sentence be conditionally commuted to life sentence with all but 49 years suspended. During most of your incarceration, you have served your sentence in exemplary fashion. You have chosen to be positive and a productive person. Please make the most of this second chance."
A second chance hundreds of juvenile lifers may never get. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm John Yang in Baltimore.
So, hold on. Let me turn that off now. I really felt like that was very enlightening. It gave a lot of information, and that's just one area. I've been watching a show with my daughter called Kids Behind Bars, and it's called Life or Parole, and it's pretty interesting. It basically it's an A&E show, and it deals with this exact subject. And the show takes an in-depth look at the cases of the juveniles who were sentenced prior to the rulings. And according to the show's description, the focus is split between the facts of the crime when they were originally committed, combined with new evidence that has come to light, and the real-time updates regarding potential releases, parole hearings, and resentencings as they currently unfold. Each episode includes exclusive commentary from the convicted offenders from prison, plus perspectives from leading psychologists, law enforcement, and reporters closest to each case. And I have seen one. I think I've watched 4 episodes total. One of them I do know was released, and I think that 2 of them were found to not be released. And then the 4th one kind of fell under this heading of another governor who didn't want to sign these the releases. So I find that really hard. And that's one of the things now we've always talked about here on Murder by Design, that, we do support the death penalty. But over the last 2 years, I think that our team's processing and thought process on the death penalty has shifted just a tiny bit, in that we believe that it should really only be used for the most heinous of situations, and where the proof is just absolutely undeniable. So DNA evidence and just so much more. But even in that case, like I was thinking about how this pertained to a case that Brandy and I and the girls have worked on all together. And that is the case of Rodney Reed out of Texas. And I called Brandy the other night because I was watching the Innocence Project show on Netflix, and it was talking about, the DNA evidence hadn't been tested in all these different cases and how they were able to, free these people and everything. And I thought to myself, but the DNA evidence in Rodney's case wouldn't make any difference, because the DNA evidence was what was the problem, is one of the main problems with that case, was because it was supplied by the corrupt cops. So that wouldn't even have helped him. So we've started thinking about our process on the death penalty in a little different aspect than what we originally started off. I think we've softened a lot on it. They can't now, Stella, but they could. And I'm going to talk about that here in a minute. But I'm just trying to give Amanda enough time to get back home and get on with me. So we've talked about the death penalty quite a bit. But what I was thinking of, what made me think of that is that, we've talked about in the death penalty that we don't believe that a jury should have to decide the death penalty or no death penalty, because I don't feel like they're making an emotional decision any which way you look at it. They don't know all the laws. They don't know all the different things. There's a lot of, and it's a very hard thing to ask people that are not not law enforcement or justice system officials to make a decision like that. And so we've talked about that. And so I think, I thought about putting it back on a judge, but then that's just one man, right? So one man or one woman who makes a decision. I don't think that's right either. So we had suggested that possibly, a professional panel that would include like psychiatrists and police officers and judges and different officials, like from all different parts of the system, doctors, things where they can have a more comprehensive look at when the death penalty is appropriate and when it isn't in the sentencing phase, and that they can look at all different kinds of things and basically put together that kind of panel that then once the jury has decided that they're guilty, would go ahead and go into the sentencing phase. But Amanda's going to talk with you guys when she gets on here. I hope she gets home to be able to talk with us tonight. If not, I mean, I've got a lot of the information and stuff, but she's going to talk to you a lot about the adolescent brain. But one of the things that, according to the deathpenaltyinfo.org, 3 professional organizations and 8 practitioners in the field of neuroscience and neuropsychology have joined a Texas death row prisoner, and this was as of this year, in challenging the constitutionality of the state's use of future dangerousness findings to impose the death penalty on defendants who were younger than age 21 at the time of their offense. So their brief, filed in the U.S. Supreme Court on July 19th, 2020, argues, based on the great weight of scientific evidence, that predictions of whether an offender under age 21 will be a future danger to society are inherently unreliable and should not be permitted in decisions of whether a young offender should live or die. So it only gives part of the facts. They don't always give everything. Yeah, exactly. That's true too. So I think that they should have, a more comprehensive look at things and how the law applies to that. But so this is this future dangerousness. So basically this is the context that the jury is supposed to look at in determining whether a person gets life or not. So basically they're trying to say that whether this person will be a future danger if they were allowed parole at some point in time throughout their life. And it's really hard in kids who are 21 or younger for you guys to even determine that, because like I said, their brains are not fully developed. So if a brain doesn't finish developing until 25, they're making decisions that aren't rational, and they don't have capacity for rationale. And it's the part of the brain that they're using is the part of the brain that is without like the ability to stop a split second decision or impulses. They can't stop impulses. So it's kind of sad that these people are going through this now. There's a lot of different things. So we're going to talk a little bit about the death penalty. I'm also going to talk about life in prison and how it relates to killer kids. But, what do you guys think about these kids? Like, one of the cases that I find pretty fascinating in this case is that it's not a killing case. They tried to kill the young lady, but they weren't successful. And thankfully, and that's only by the sheer will of that little girl that she got away, which was the case of the Slenderman case, which is these 2 girls. It was a group of 3 girls, 3 friends. And 2 of the girls decided that they were going to kill one of their other friends. And based on the fact that they thought that I don't know if you guys know the Slenderman legend, it's like this weird guy and it's a creepypasta kind of thing. And basically they thought that by killing their friend, they were offering her up as a sacrifice. And so and then they would become proxies of Slenderman. And they thought that was going to open like some crazy realm for them and all kinds of different things. And these were kids. I mean, these were kids. I don't even think they were in their teens yet. They were kids. And so these girls have been sentenced in this case to life behind bars. And they're not even behind bars. Both of them, I believe, are in mental institutions. And, you know, they're not allowed to be hugged by their parents. They're not allowed to be, you know, they're not allowed freedoms at all. And the one girl was found out to be schizophrenic. So she was hearing voices in her head, you know, and it was untreated. She hadn't had medication. So she's doing life, and she really didn't have the capacity to really understand what she was hearing and thinking. Schizophrenia, you know, that's a terrible mental disorder. And this poor girl, you know, she's riddled with these voices in her head. And, you know, it's just, it's so sad because the other young lady, you know, she thankfully survived, and she is able to go on with her life and live a normal, productive life. But these other two girls, it changed their lives forever too. And their parents are having to deal with this. You know, it's a really sad story. And we talked about that one a little while back, but I think we're going to bring it up again on our next our next season of The Good Wife's Guide to True Crime. Yeah, it's a horribly sad story, Brendy. Exactly. So, I want to take a minute, you know, to talk about one of our affiliate programs. So as we finish up a pretty stressful year and a highly stressful holiday season, we think everyone could use a little help in saving money. The Good Wives have been working out ways we can help you save money and for us to earn a little. And Rakuten has been a great answer. Rakuten is an app that gives you cash back for shopping at over 2,500 different stores. And if you sign up using the link in our show notes, not only will you save money for shopping, but once you spend $20, then Rakuten will give you back $20 and they'll send us $20 just for referring you. So it's a good deal for everyone. So you guys should totally sign up if you haven't. I love the app myself. It's a great little app. You save a lot of money. Hang on, Christina just messaged me. Okay, I don't. Somebody else has got to give her the login. She got kicked out of YouTube. Let me tell her she can watch it on Facebook though. You can. Oh, she's just trying to add. She's trying to add the link for you guys. Okay, I forgot. Okay, well, anyway, Amanda's not home yet, so I'm really getting worried about the fact that she's going to be able to even join us tonight. You know, the adolescent brain, like I said, it's still developing, and these kids are they're acting like adults, but without the capacity of adult rational thought. And so, you know, and one of the things that I remember thinking about when giving these kids life sentences is think about how long that is. So the average person, you know, lives to be 80, 85, you know? And so if these kids are being convicted at 13, 14, even 16, 17, think about how long a time period that they are actually spending in jail, as opposed to like a 30-year-old or a 25-year-old, you know, for that. And that's like really crazy to me that they, you know, they're spending a long time. I'm going to show it. And then let's see. Okay. But anyway, it's going to be in the show notes as well, but there's our code, guys, for you guys to get the spend 20 and get 20. So, but I mean, they're spending a lot of time behind bars. So what are you guys thinking about this? Do you think it's appropriate for these kids to get life sentences in any case? Or do you think it's appropriate only in like the most heinous of cases? Do you not think it's appropriate at all? Drop a comment. Let me know what you're thinking. So I'm just going to kind of go into, first of all, the death penalty. The imposing of the death penalty on adolescents under the age of 18 was banned by the Supreme Court on February 28, 2005 in the case of Roper versus Simmons. So on March 2005, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the 8th and 14th Amendments forbid the execution of offenders who were younger than 18 when the crime occurred. The vote was 5-4. Justice Kennedy wrote, the vote was 5-4. And then Justice Kennedy was writing for the majority. Kennedy, Breyer, Ginsburg, Soutier, and Stevens, JJ, stated, when a juvenile offender commits a heinous crime, the state can exact forfeiture of some of the most basic liberties, but the state cannot extinguish his life and his potential to attain a mature understanding of his own humanity. The court The court reaffirmed the necessity of referring to the evolving standards of decency. I'm so sorry, my nose is killing me today. Decency that mark the progress of a maturing society, to determine which punishments are so disproportionate as to be cruel and unusual. Based on the rejection of the juvenile death penalty by 30 states, its infrequent use even in those states in which it remained on the books, and the consistent trend in the states towards abolition of the practice in its entirety, the court found that a national consensus had evolved against the practice. The court determined that today our society views juveniles as categorically less culpable than the average criminal. So let's see. Christina says, I say give them life without parole versus the death penalty. Ty says death penalty should not be given to children under the age of 18. Christina, do you think life without parole is appropriate, or should they be given life with the possibility of parole so that as they mature and get older, you might be able to see a completely different person emerge? Because, I think about my own daughter who struggled with anger issues and things like that. And if something bad had ever happened, she's vastly matured from the ages of like 13 to now being 20 something, and so I think about that, and I think it should depend on the extent of the crime. So as of February 28, 2005, the day before Roper versus Simmons was decided, 71 persons were on death row for juvenile crimes. These 71 condemned juvenile offenders constituted about 2% of the total death row population of 3,471. Although all were ages 16 or 17 at the times of their crimes, their age ranges from 18 to 43 when Roper was decided. There were under death sentences. They were under death sentences in 12 different states and had been on death row for 6 months to 24 years. Texas had by the far the largest death row for juvenile offenders, holding 29. That's 41% of the national total of 71 juvenile offenders. All of the juvenile offenders who were on death row at the time Roper was decided were male and had been convicted and sentenced to death for murder. Most of these juveniles came from violent homes, were underprivileged, and a vast majority were minorities. The arguments and decisions relied heavily on a prior ruling that offenders with mental retardation were not candidates for execution. The idea was floated that much like those who suffer from mental retardation, juvenile offenders are not capable of rational thought, processing all ramifications of actions, and their brains are not developed enough to control impulses. So that's why they overturned the death penalty for these cases. So they were saying that a child's brain is that to a kid or to an adult even who is struggling with some sort of delayed advancing. So it's so sad, and so if you can think about the fact that somebody who has one of these mental disorders, or like they're saying, a mentally disabled person as far as mental retardation. That's not the word I'm using. That's the word that is in the documents, just so you guys know. It's very similar. They have the same type of different processing of the brain, and they use the same type of parts of their brain because their brains are just totally underdeveloped, Yeah, like look at the Central Park 5. They were totally innocent. Now, in the Central Park 5, we've talked about that before, and we're going to cover that case in great detail coming up. But they weren't innocent of everything. They were in the park that night. They were doing some things that weren't legal. But by no means did they commit the crimes that they were tried for, and that the prosecutor and many of the people who were involved in that case, I really believe that they knew that those were not the boys. And if you watch those guys and what they were put through in their interrogations, it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. Okay, hang on. I got a message from Amanda. Hang on. Let me see her. Okay, she just walked into their house. Okay, so let me just tell her to click link. Just click the link and it will put you in. And good, she gets to join us. So So the death sentence, I definitely think that was a good thing of taking that off the table. Yeah, exactly. So, and I don't know what the replacement word would be, like mental slowness. I don't know what, because I don't like to even talk about that as like a thing. So I don't know what else I would say, but that was just what the case said itself. So I didn't want to change the wording of the case. So the next sentencing on the chopping block was that of life sentences of juvenile offenders. And the United States is the only country that still imposes life sentences on juveniles. In 2010, the Supreme Court ruled in Graham versus Florida. Originally, that life sentences. Oh, here she is. Yay! Let me get her added to her. Okay, I can only see like part of your head. So tilt your camera or whatever you're doing up so we can see your whole face. There! Now I can see you. Hang on, let me change over to.
Hey, your voice is all messed up.
Yeah, hold on a second.
Okay,
there.
cool.
Now it should be better. Is it better now?
No.
Okay, it's got to be you because everybody else had said that has not had a problem.
Leave and come back?
Yeah, go out and come back in. Maybe you're having a problem.
Okay, hold on just a second.
Yeah. So intellectually disabled, you think that's the correct term? Okay, because I'm not sure. I'll ask Amanda because I don't know, but that's what they were calling it. So I really don't know. I don't want to offend anybody by using the word. I just didn't know. Challenged isn't right, Stella, because that's different. That's different. It's a little different. Okay, hold on. Let's see. Okay, better?
It's like all weird and bubbly.
Weird and bubbly?
Like it's like scratchy. There we go.
That's weird.
There we go.
Is it where you can't hear me or?
It's better now. I couldn't understand what you were saying. It was like scratchy.
Okay. Hey, so the sorry, that's my dog. She's freaking out because Abigail is taking out the trash. So the case file that I was using to talk about they compared juvenile offenders to that of people who are mentally retarded, and it said mental retardation, and that's what it used in that terminology. What is the better terminology now? Because I don't know what it would be. Because it's not like just disabled or challenged, because
it's
that would encompass everybody, and that's not the same thing.
I think it's intellectually challenged.
Okay.
I don't know what's politically correct, but
yeah, I don't want to offend anybody by saying it, but that was just the wording that was inside the document that I was reading from. So, so I've kind of covered. I'll kind of catch you up since you weren't here. Mm-hmm. I basically covered just some stuff about the studies show that the brain isn't developed until 25, and what parts of the brain that adults think of as opposed to the part of the brain that children think of it. And then I covered the death penalty, and then throwing out the death penalty when it comes to juvenile offenders. And then basically I talked a little bit about the idea of future dangerousness being used to impose sentencing on juveniles. So that's pretty much where we're at. I was kind of getting into life sentencing now, and I know I wanted you to kind of talk a little bit about the adolescent brain itself, and what they're like. So you want to jump in?
I really liked the article that you read. I haven't heard that comparison, but it's a good one of it would be like sentencing somebody with kind of like a lower IQ in the social department. But they don't have like juveniles, their impulsivity area of the brain is not formed. So whereas you and I can think like, man, I really shouldn't kill my husband.
Right.
A kid is not, a teenager is not gonna be like, man, I shouldn't kill my girlfriend. They're just going to go do it. And like in the 80s with gang violence, I think it was the 80s. Pretty sure it was the 80s with gang and crack and all of the, all that. Yeah, they came up with the idea of like the super predators. Teenagers were super predators because they were becoming really violent over drugs. And then the Menendez brothers came out and killed their parents. And it was like all fearing of juveniles, but really their brain isn't I mean, you can think. I mean, I know I don't think the way I thought at 18. I don't know about
Right.
anybody else. But.
Right. Well, that's what I was talking about of my own daughter who struggled with types of anger issues. You know, what she was like at 13 is vastly different than what she's like now in her 20s. You know, she's become a very mature, very caring, considerate, loving person. When she was 13, 14 years old, I literally wanted to kill her. Like I was like, oh my God, I don't know how this kid's going to make it to 18. I'm going to kill her. And you know, and we went through a lot, and but the amount of work that she has done and put through to herself to get herself to this point where she is now is incredible. And I was just talking about the Slenderman case of those girls. Those girls weren't even teenagers yet, you know, and now they're sentenced to a lifetime in a mental institution. And you know, and so the thing that I was quoting was from not just an article, it actually was what they used as their basis for abolishing the death penalty for children offenders, even violent criminal offenders, because they were comparing that. So that was in Atkins versus whatever. And that's what they were using was a lot of the different rulings to throw out the death penalty for people that were mentally incapacitated. They were comparing it in the same way for juvenile offenders.
Well, yeah. And then when, like I said, in the 80s, that's when they started with life in prison. Back in the day, you know, the what do they call it? It was ages like 7 that you can be like in criminal court. And then, but before, if you were under 16, 17, you got a slap on the wrist. But after the 80s,
yeah, they brought the death penalty. Yeah, they brought the death penalty back in 1976, cool. And from 1976 to like 2000, I had some data on how many kids were sentenced. It was really bad.
They were afraid of them,
you know. But then the ones that were sentenced to the death penalty right before they overturned that in Roper, there was 71 condemned juvenile offenders on death row.
God, I can imagine.
Yeah,
like sentencing a child to death. I couldn't do it. It'd be rough.
Yeah. So then they started deciding that they were going to, you know, take the life sentence of juvenile offenders away as well. They didn't want to do that either. So the United States, they were the only country that imposes life sentences on juveniles. So in 2010, the Supreme Court ruled in Graham versus Florida originally that life sentences could not be imposed on juveniles in non-homicide cases. It was found to be unconstitutional under the 8th and 14th Amendment rights, and the court ruled it was cruel and unusual punishment. And one of the things I was just talking about was like, if you think about when a person gets a life sentence, you know, if you're looking at 25, 30-year-old person and their life expectancy is 70, 80, you know, and of course in prison, it's a little less sometimes, you know, depending on, you know, because of all the violence that just goes on in prisons in general. I mean, but some people have lived to be 80, 85 years old in prison, you know, but you think about how long a period of time is that for a kid that is underdeveloped, and then now they're in there for 60, 70 years.
Right. So let's talk about this. Like, this is one thing that really bothers me. Like, I'm all for like punishment or retribution, whatever. But at the end of the day, when you see like the felony murder law really bothers me. So if you commit if a murder happens with the commission of a crime, it doesn't matter. In some states, like they will sentence you to life. It's
a mandatory life sentence.
And there are kids that go into like a robbery. Should they be robbing places? No. But if you look at their backgrounds, they don't know anything else. And so we throw them away and lock away the key. But they didn't even, you know, some of these kids didn't even realize like, oh, I didn't know my friend had a gun.
Right.
And I read one that was being sentenced to life without parole, and one of the perpetrators got shot. Not even an innocent bystander. It was one of the people. It was like a group of 5, I think. But they sentenced him to life without parole. I think that's crazy. That's crazy to me. It's crazy talk. I understand if like I was on the other side, I would get it, but it's still crazy to me.
Well, yeah. So in 2012, the Supreme Court further ruled that even in homicide cases, that mandatory life sentence were also a violation, and that the court must take into account the actions of the individual and can only impose a sentence when the crime is so heinous, no level of rehabilitation is expected. So they took away that idea of, like you said, that in the commission of another crime, they're automatically sentenced to a life sentence without the possibility, of parole. So in 2012, they were able to do that. And then, let's see, in 2016, it was further argued that the new ruling on non-mandatory life sentencing needed to be applied retroactively. So, like I was telling them, my daughter and I have been watching this show on A&E that's called it's called Killer Kids Behind Bars, Life or Parole, and that's a really crazy, I don't know. I feel like giving them no opportunity to grow and change and understand themselves. Like, because when you're 13, 14, even 16, 17, you don't understand yourself or what the hell is going on in your brain, like.
And I'm not saying just let them out either.
No.
But when it comes down to it, if you look at our system, we are not a rehabilitating country. Like if you look at certain
punitive
Switzerland and like Greenland, life without parole is unheard of. Even in the most serious of situations, it's completely unheard of. People
Canada too, like
away for 8 years.
Canada too, like look at what's her name, Homolka. Her and her husband, they and has kids now. Like, oh, and that's a sick thought. Like she should have never been allowed out.
She killed her.
Yeah, she killed her sister. But and she was an adult, so but yes, exactly. I think especially in this situation with children, I think that we need to be a more rehabilitative thought process as opposed to a punitive. We need to be getting these kids help. We need to be giving them education and helping them get out of a situation, because I was saying that most of the kids that were on death row or in these life sentences come from impoverished families. They come from violent families. They come from, drug families where they don't know anything else but that life. And to say that one instance is who they are for the rest of their life, that's terrible. Now, when we're talking about like the case that I was bringing up the other day there was one, Ty was telling us about one, it was basically an altercation between two kids over a girl. But then there was one that Tori just told me about that's breaking here in Virginia. That I guess either, I don't know if it happened Christmas or New Year's, but it was a kid who basically him and a girl, and not his girlfriend, just a girl, came together and killed his entire family, including his three-year-old little brother, who was hiding under the bed from his brother. Now, in that case, yeah, absolutely. I don't think that kid should ever get out. That's not rehabilitatable, so I do believe that there is an instance for it. But like you said, when it's something like they went in to rob a convenience store and something happens,
this kid and exactly wasn't even inside. Like the case I wrote a paper on it, but it was literally, he was in the car and the guy got shot or something. I think that was a convenience store robbery. But he was sentenced to life without parole and he wasn't even in the fucking building. Like, come on. I don't even think adults should be. I don't even know if I agree with adults being sentenced like that. That's pretty. You can only handle association so much. Like
right. Association so much. Right. Just because you're there and somebody does something doesn't mean that you chose to do it, but I don't know. It's like we said, it's all about extenuating circumstances. And we were talking about how, yes, we all support the death penalty. I mean, almost all of us on the team, I don't remember if you do or you don't, but, the rest of us do, but only in certain circumstances.
I'm on the fence.
But that we felt that asking a jury to determine that was actually kind of cruel to the jury, because they don't have the capacity. It's going to be an emotional thought process. They don't have the capacity to make that. And so I was proposing that, like, not even just throwing it back to a judge, but that there should be a professional panel that comes in after they've been found guilty that can make that determination. So that would come with, like, doctors and lawyers and psychologists and police officers and all those that would be on a board together that would understand the letter of the law and what this really means and all of those different things before deciding that somebody should be sentenced to death or even life without possibility, because I think that it's just too much to put on the average American person to decide whether somebody should live or die.
Actually, in totality, the a life without, or a death sentence is more expensive than life without parole.
Yes. And if you think about a life sentence for a kid, it became something like $2.5 million to have a kid on a life sentence, or even and even more for a death penalty case, because of how much they get to appeal and do all these different things, so but I believe that that once you're, a death penalty case, if it's a really heinous case, I don't think you should get 95 different appeals either. Like if it's like a case of like, the Golden State Killer, or like we talked about, one of the most heinous ones that we talked about last season on Good Wives was the Toolbox Killers. Like, and Laura Brand did a lot of work with them. She worked with both Norris and Bittaker. They were horrific. I mean, horrific crimes. No doubt they did them. It was so bad that when they played one of the tapings that they made, like they taped their victims being tortured. And when they played that, like people were running out of the courtroom and puking. Even the prosecuting attorney, Stephen Kay, he left and he was in tears. And when they broke for a court break, and you could tell he was visibly and emotionally upset, and that's somebody who listens to the worst of the worst on every day. Right. So, but those cases, I think there shouldn't be tons of appeals and everything and save my life. No, you didn't want to save other people's lives. But when you're talking about in the instance of, like, we've talked about Scott Peterson and whether he was guilty or not. Now we all, all of us on the team, I don't remember if you think it, but I do know that everyone else besides Colleen thinks he's guilty. I don't remember what your thought process was, but we all agreed that we didn't think that death penalty was appropriate in the case, and that I felt that was absolutely emotionally charged idea, because it was, I believe it was emotionally charged based on this whole thing of Connor, the death of Connor.
The baby. But really, I mean, we talked about this a little bit last week. I mean, there wasn't enough hard evidence, like real evidence, to sentence anybody to death, because I was
to death in that sense.
Do I think he did it? Yeah. Do I think it was a good case? No,
not a death penalty case. Definitely, it was an emotional decision. So let's talk. You have a little bit more information about kids and that commit these crimes, or anything else you wanted to share about it? Or?
I mean, really, the big thing is I think it was recent. You said the date, but dates are not my go-to, but it was recent when they said that it was completely unconstitutional to sentence them to life and without parole, unless it's a heinous crime. But then you get into like the individualization of what a heinous crime. Our justice system can't handle that at all.
Right.
But kids, I mean, it's hard for me, because you'll have one kid in one state that'll kill somebody and be out in 2 years at 18, and then in another state, and a lot of it has to do with like money. I hate to say it, but if you look at the socioeconomic backgrounds of the kids that are spending life in prison versus, the kids that had, what was that condition called? It was like an entitlement condition. That guy, like,
affluenza.
Yes.
It's not a thing. It's not a thing. It's not a thing. You know my thought process on affluenza. That's not a thing.
I think it's bullshit. I think it's
the most bullshit thing ever.
If you have a child that's sentenced, like, it's a perfect example, though. You have a low-income family where a kid robs a convenience store and gets life without parole. And then you have, this kid with affluenza that killed multiple people, right? Or was it just one?
No, I can't remember which case it was,
'Cause
but
he
Brock
caused a
Turner
big-
claimed affluenza too, and the fact that he raped that girl. Like it's like I used to say, I was like, you know what? So I've been okay. So if you guys know what affluenza is, it's like the idea that these kids have been so privileged their whole lives that they can't understand the ramifications of their actions, and they don't have consequences and everything. I was like, okay, so basically you're saying because I'm rich, I didn't know better? No, screw you. So I said, well, I grew up in a, relatively, poor family. My mom was a single parent. She was very sick. My grandparents helped out a lot. I worked from the age of 13 on, and even as an adult, we've been at the lower bracket of middle income, always struggling. And so I'm like, so what do I get to claim it when I become, rich and famous someday that, it's povertenza because I lived in poverty for so long? No.
For every other kid. Like,
right.
Come on. But
I lived in poverty. If anything, that's more likely. I lived in poverty for so long that my moral compass is not really high, because I don't. There was always trying to skirt the way to live. How do we survive? How do we get by? So. Okay, so the actual definition of affluenza is a psychological malaise supposedly affecting wealthy young people, symptoms of which include a lack of motivation, feelings of guilt, and sense of isolation.
You're not telling me this is an actual disorder now.
Oh yeah, no, it's
DSM-5, right? No, it's not the DSM-5.
I don't know, but that's just the actual psychological definition.
I mean, okay, so it kind of, the whole thought process, the whole sociological theory on like we're all noble savages. So I guess it kind of plays on that a little bit. Like you grow up in a dog eat dog world, and then you are dog eat dog. But if you grow up in the rich neighborhood, you feel like that just blows my mind. It's
entitled to be able to do shit to people that you shouldn't be able to. It is. It's very narcissistic, and it's sociopathic. I'm sorry.
Well, especially a lot of those kids though have parents that are in definite positions of to have sociopathic tendencies. Executives and CEOs.
Right.
But I couldn't, like you said, I couldn't go run over a bunch of people and be like, "Oh, I'm poor."
I'm poor, so I didn't know any better. Poor. I don't know. Sorry. Yeah. Well, even if you think back to what we were talking about, if it's say, we're poor, we're committing a crime because we're poor, and in the middle of that crime, my friend pops out a gun and shoots the freaking sales clerk. Now, do I get to claim, oh shit, we were poor and so he shot him, and I shouldn't be held accountable because of that, so it kind of goes back into that, where do you draw this line of accountability, and where does it really? I don't know. I think that if you're in a wealthy family, then you should know better. I don't know. I just affluenza.
Well, there's some kids that have no problems in their. I mean, it's very rare, but there are kids that have no, problems in their home, and then grow up to be psychos. But there's also a lot of other things we're learning. Like, have you heard of pandas yet? Like pandas from Strep. Like,
right.
Totally makes these kids. I mean, Dr. Phil style psychotic.
Yeah.
And it's just from a virus. So there's so many things. I think especially when it comes to kids, everything should be individualized. And I know we don't have the manpower to do that, but I think it's really important because they're fucking kids. I don't know. They're kids. I can't look at a 16-year-old and think that's an adult. So why, when it's a crime, do you think like that? And it's because of emotions that play into it. Really, people get all. Right. Like the Slender Man case killed me. Like that broke my heart. I couldn't believe it. But her family seemed really nice. So it just kind of happened. She had a lot of problems, so I'm pretty sure.
Well, she was schizophrenic. She was an undiagnosed schizophrenia. And so she was literally hearing voices. She was hearing voices in her head.
At the time to diagnose?
No, I think the parents didn't want, her father was schizophrenic. They did not want to diagnose her with schizophrenia because they didn't want to saddle her with some sort of stigma, I guess,
okay. Well, there's a difference between like ADHD and schizophrenia.
Schizophrenia.
Like a huge difference.
Oh, I really felt like the parents, while they were good parents, I mean, they were decent parents. They weren't doing anything to be neglectful or anything. I think that they were doing a disservice to their daughter by not getting her medicated and helping her.
That's neglect. That's medical neglect. because
and I don't think they were doing it intentionally, but they really thought they were making the right decision. But here's what happened from that decision. By your decision to not act, your daughter acted, and now she's paying the price. I think she had some problems too. They're both in mental institutions. Neither one of them are behind in like juvenile. I think one of them is now in a juvenile facility and then will go to a criminal, an adult facility when she turns 18. I just think it's sad. Yeah, one that didn't have clear-cut issues. It's very sad, both of them. And if you hear them, if you hear the parents talk, they can't even give their kids hugs. Like, those girls are going to live their entire lives without having physical contact with people, and no supportive people in their lives, like the parents can only visit so often. So these girls are growing up in this system, and it's just, it's unfortunate. And the other young lady, I mean, she survived and gets to go on and live the rest of her life. And I'm not saying that what they did was right, but at some point in time, yeah.
Like, you can't just leave them behind I mean, usually in terms of like mental institution, which is really rare, you'll be evaluated every once in a while, but it's so rare that you actually get out. Even if you're doing it is very rare to get out, because there was one guy that literally got out of the mental institution and went and killed a kid right away. The doctors didn't want him released, but his time was up, and now they make it extremely difficult.
Right. Well, that's why the insanity plea is not used very often. And besides, I think that the insanity plea is kind of a crock of shit, because anyone who decides to take another person's life obviously is not playing with a full deck. Like, I mean, you decided to take another person's life, unless it's in a crime of passion or a moment of defense. You chose to take another person's life. Like Gypsy, like, her and Nicholas chose to take Dee Dee's life. Like, obviously they're not mentally all there. They've both suffer from severe mental incapacities, diminished capacity, all kinds of things with the two of them. But, when you're thinking about that, it's just like, I don't know. It's such a hard thing to think of, taking a person out of society forever and ever. Amen. Especially when they're young or they've been through something pretty traumatic through their life. But the insanity defense is not used because, it can honestly be a worse sentence than an actual sentence. Like, so if Gypsy had pled, if they had used an insanity defense for Gypsy, which they really could have tried to do so with all the stuff that she went through, then what happens is that if they're awarded that, like, not guilty by the reason of insanity, it doesn't mean that they're out walking the streets. They go to a mental institution, and there is no set clear-cut date. Like, Gypsy has a clear-cut date. On such and such date, you are out, unless she commits crimes inside and gets extra terms and everything. But for that one offense, she's out at a certain time. Whereas if she had been sentenced to a mental institution, it's whenever the doctor decides to release you. Yeah. And if the state is getting money, they're not going to release you.
Wow. It's just like a jail. I mean, really, they charge you by day in jail.
Yeah.
So it's terrible. And it sucks, because when we're like looking back on all these laws, and like with the, even with DNA exoneration, like how many people have been let out? Yeah, like 300 something or something. But that is a lot of people to be saved.
It is. Well, and that's one of the things, like I talked about earlier, was a case that Brandy and I and the girls have worked out of Texas, was Rodney Reed, where I was watching an Innocence Project thing on Netflix. I was just saying this earlier, and that they were talking about how the DNA has released so many people. And I was thinking about his case. And in his case, DNA isn't going to help him, because it's the police officers who are corrupt that put the DNA into the file to be able to show the DNA was there. They had been holding on to it in their own personal locked closet. Like, where the fuck is that? Like, I've never heard of such a thing. Like, it was in his personal locked closet. What do you mean, my personal locked closet in my office? What? You're just storing DNA in your office in a closet? Like, what? It's not checked in or checked out or in a lab or what? This is absurd. So that wouldn't even help him, because they planted the DNA. So how is that even going to help him? It won't.
Well, it's just like with the Manson murders, if you watch the video clip of them like finding the T-shirt that they threw out the window, I watch way too much murder crap, obviously.
I know, I do too.
He wasn't wearing gloves, picking that shit up. He wasn't wearing gloves, just barehanded, just like picking it up. Like, oh, it made me cringe. And now with all the advances, I don't know. I just feel like DNA exonerations and stuff like that. When it comes to sentencing, you should have to have concrete, hard evidence to be sentenced to death or life in prison without
possibility. Yeah. Well, yeah, like it's so funny. Did you see that Nancy Grace just released something the other day? I saw it on Crime Online about the fact that the Manson family may have been linked to more murders now.
I believe it.
I believe it.
Well, they found that body on the ranch too.
Right.
They just got rid of anybody that they didn't want around, or.
Well, I think that they probably. I mean, back then, like think about investigations back then compared to what they are now. You know, like.
Well, it's kind of hard to miss, like being stabbed 50 times.
All right, right.
It was pretty. Yeah. I don't know. The Manson thing got me because of the just picking it up with the glove, without the gloves. Like in 50 years, you know, we're gonna look back at the advances we've made. Today
what's your
like, what the hell?
What's your thought process on that? Do you think that those women that committed those murders should be in prison for life, or should they get out?
I'm going to be honest on this one, and I think life, because to do that to somebody, to rip a baby out of somebody's womb, you have to be. I mean, there's no rehabilitation for that, and you can.
And they're all still
sex and drugs. No. Like, there's been a lot of people.
No. But they also made choices to do sex and drugs, but those girls were young too.
And I've never. Okay, I'm going to be completely honest with you. You know, I was a hippie when I was a kid, and you know, I like to have fun, but I have never ever gotten messed up and wanted to kill somebody. Like, it was never the sex and drugs that made me want to go out and kill somebody. I just don't understand how that was like. Their defense was Manson pretty much seduced them with sex and drugs and forced them to do this. I just don't get it.
Well, that kind of goes to one of the topics we're going to be talking about in the upcoming weeks is these cult like behaviors. These cults, the big cults, the ones that are super, super detrimental and what they have. Nexus. Yeah, and a couple others. I mean, like, there's several different ones that are very, very detrimental cult-like things. And then there's other cults that aren't that bad. Like the Mormons, I believe they're a cult based on the definition of a cult, but they're a loving, wonderful, sweet family, Mormons, like they're just all Mormons. Unless you're talking about fundamental Mormonism, like under Jeff, whatever the heck his name, Jeffries, I can't think of his name.
I know who you're talking about.
But I have those in our thing to talk about those. Like, yeah, but I mean, in the situation with Manson, like, I do believe that he brainwashed those girls. They were very susceptible. They were all girls that came from situations that were not good, and he basically became like their savior, And I do think he supplied them with drugs and what? Yeah. It is. Absolutely. Absolutely. But I don't know. I still feel like you talk to those women, they've been interviewed several times. They're all still very crazy. They're crazy.
No remorse. None.
No, none.
What's her name?
Nope. And then if they say anything, they're always like, well, Charlie made me do it. Charlie made me do it. Like, no, you did that because you wanted to do it yourself,
And honestly, but it takes a lot more than drugs and like the sex. Like they weren't, I don't know. I feel like those girls, there was no helping.
Now that's a case where I would think that's where I believe that life without the possibility was appropriate for what they had done, And I do think that, Charlie, he received he had parole hearings. Nobody ever thought, oh yeah, let's let that guy out, like, oh my God. And he didn't actually kill anyone specifically.
I was about to say.
He didn't wield the knives or the guns or anything, but he sure as shit caused that crap, He was psycho.
I think that was like the first time that anybody really had been charged life without parole for the murder that was like facilitated through somebody else. But I just don't. I always felt kind of bad for him because he didn't. I know he killed that one guy that he left on the ranch, but he didn't actually do it.
No, but he was crazy. He never got better. It's not like he thought he was a god, for heaven's sakes. Like, he's carving swastikas into his head. Like, no sorry for him. No sorry for him. But if you look at the background that he went through, I mean, his life was not a good one. I mean, like, what
he
was
came
just
pissed
from.
Off he was a bad singer. And the Beach Boys
right?
stole his crap.
Right. But the Beach Boys stole his stuff.
I just feel like that was the first time. I mean, it's hard to wrap your head around being stuck in prison for life when you didn't actually commit the crime. That's crazy to me, but I don't think it was the first. Like, they found the body on the ranch and stuff.
Oh, I think he probably did kill somebody at some point in time himself. I there's no doubt that you can tell me that he didn't. He was very obsessed with that, but it just, I don't know. Like, you think about, like, Pamela Smart, she did not kill her husband herself.
I do not think she should be a husband. She shouldn't be in jail at all. No, I'm sorry. Pamela Smart.
Well, I mean, I've talked to Diane Damond, who was one of the ones who broke that case open and spoke with Pamela a lot. And she feels the same way. She feels that, the people who committed the actual murder are out and she's still in prison.
That is wrong.
For what? For a boy deciding, what?
That she did.
They never proved. I mean, was she suspect? Was she very suspicious? Did she probably put the head, the idea in the kid's head that maybe it'd be better if my husband was gone? Yeah, probably. But did she? Do I think that she like masterminded the whole thing? No.
And honestly, like, those kids. No, I saw that. I had actually never heard of Pamela Smart until like 2 months ago. And I watched it on Netflix, I think, and it blew my mind. Like, yeah, she should have been charged with child or, sexual assault. Obviously, it was still a child, but life without parole while they're out, that's just mean. Like, that's just mean. I don't know. I think they should totally let her out, and I don't even know if she has any appeals left.
Yeah.
But it's hard. There was no hard evidence in that. That was what's so messed up. There's nothing. You should not be able to take away somebody's life with no hard evidence. It's all hearsay.
No.
It blows my mind. And same thing with Scott Peterson. There was no hard evidence really, besides he was in the same spot. Or was supposed to be in the same spot as. What was the evidence?
I mean, we went through it. You got to listen to our 4-part series on it. If you listen to our 4-part series on it, it's pretty interesting with everything that we were able to come up with in that case. Like I said, I took a very psychological thought process of it. Dr. Robbie Ludwig came on with me. She wrote a book about the killer spouses, life, love, and marriage, and the killer spouse. It's called Till Death Do Us Part. Love, Life, and the Killer Spouse. I think it's a great book. She's amazing. She's absolutely amazing. And she came on. I talked with her about it, and she basically profiled him pretty accurately in what I see. It was the same things that I saw in him. Very narcissistic tendencies, very sociopathic, and so. But I would, for that kind of approach, Colleen really went through the evidence of what she saw as far as the timeline, and then on the 4th episode we came back together and we all kind of hashed it out. And I mean, I think Christina and I and Tori did a pretty decent job of proving that a lot of the things that are out there is like, oh, this is this and that. No, it's not true. Like I harped on one of the things that I had a really hard time with was the amount of time frame that would have been if Lacey was walking the dog and as a 9-month pregnant woman, walking the dog, and as far as she would have had to travel in a certain amount of time to be seen here or here, it didn't add up. It just literally didn't. And then when you strip a bunch of that stuff away, there's no other explanation for who it was. There just isn't. There is no other explanation. And when, it's by process of elimination. Do I think that there was a lot of evidence? But no, but there's not a lot of evidence, and there's not a lot of hardcore, what you call non-circumstantial evidence in any case. The only non-circumstantial evidence is DNA evidence. So if there's not DNA evidence, every case is circumstantial. So, and that's why I took a psychological approach to it, because I was like, well, you can strip away you can strip away circumstantial evidence in any which way you want to interpret it. You can make a case for either side with it, So then I looked and I said, but the one thing you can't change is a person's psychological profile. You can't. That they are who they are and they behaved how they behaved. And when you put all that together, that's where my thought process on his guilt is, so. But anyway, I mean, so these are going to be our Tuesday night Psych Talks with Amanda. Hopefully next time she won't have too many difficulties. She'll be here with us from the very beginning. It's okay. Yeah, it's fine. I was doing a good job with it. That's why I write the outlines so that I have it like that with facts and stuff until somebody can show it. Yeah, no,
I'll do it next week. That way we both have it. Because you're like, an outline. I was like, it's all in my head. No.
Well, see, my brain goes so fast. Like I think so many things at one time, and I have so much I'm doing. I can't keep it in there if I don't write it down.
Here and here.
Yeah, and then I get lost when I'm talking. I get all confused as to what I was saying. So yeah, I agree, Christina. I agree. This God Save Me is bullshit, total bullshit. But I mean, so. But anyway, guys, next week we are talking about, what did I say we were talking about next week? I forgot. Let me find it. No, I didn't write it down. Let me see. I have it right here. I can pull it up and see what I pulled for next week. We're going to be talking about the different types of multicide killers is what we're going to be talking about next week. Yeah. You got to watch the 8-minute clip that I played at the beginning of this that I sent you earlier because it was pretty interesting. It was all about cases in Maryland that came, that had the death penalty cases and life sentence cases. It was really interesting. PBS did it. So, yeah, it's an 8-minute video that I sent you. But anyway, thanks so much for tuning in and dishing true crime with the Good Wives and Murder by Design. Don't forget to join our Patreon member club to get exclusive mini episodes, inside documents and pictures from the cases that we talk about, live YouTube discussions, and our exclusive discussion group on Facebook, and get some amazing brand new merchandise that we're working on right now. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at True Crime Wives. And for more information, check out both of our podcasts, The Good Wife Guide to True Crime and Gone Cold, on any of your favorite podcast players. And you guys can find Amanda's brand new psych blog that she is working on Vocal Plus, Medium, and on our website at madgingerentertainment.com. Madgingerentertainment.com has all of our things. So, but here's the one on Vocal Plus. And so you guys, but if you go to madgingerentertainment.com, you'll find everything that we do. So from our blogs to our podcasts to our YouTube channels and anything that we're working on outside of the true crime realm. But have a good one from the Good Wives, serving up true crime one dish at a time. Bye, guys.
Bye.